Oh my goodness. What's this guy doing? Ezra Klein? Why are you going on a podcast with this guy who's looking for virgins everywhere, man? Why are you going on a podcast, Ezra, with this man who's best friends with the gentle, silent rape guy? I don't know. Let's find out. What are they going to talk about? I'm interested.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with Tyler. Today I'm chatting with Ezra Klein, who needs no introduction. And when I say that, in fact, I do not introduce the person. Ezra has a new book out with Derek Thompson called Abundance. This is one of the best and most important books of the year. Ezra, welcome.
Always thrilled to be here, Tyler.
Your last book...
Why are they both wearing, like, thick sweaters? What did they coordinate that? This is from 6 months ago. This wouldn't have been that cold. Whatever.
And indeed, our last conversation was on political polarization. Now, how do the abundance agenda and political polarization interact?
And when are we going to have an abundance of virgins? An abundance of virgins on the silver screen. Ezra, can you tell me how the abundance agenda is going to bring us an abundance of virgins on the silver screen? Or the tiny television screen? I want to know all about the virgins.
It is an effort to recut the line of polarization. So you and I used to debate this. You said for a while you thought polarization was going down. Do you still think that? Do you think it has gone down?
I think it has more dimensions than ever before in terms of what a lot of our government does.
When are they revealing their pedos? That I think might happen. The weirdness about that particular topic might happen around the 30-minute mark, where this segment is called On Abundant Births. So strap in, folks.
And in terms of, say, racially, how people vote, I think it's down a lot.
So I think if you go, one of the things about polarization that I think makes it tricky to talk about is we say it like it is a static thing, but what you are polarized over really matters. So when I was writing a lot of the book that came out in 2020, in the cursed early quarter of 2020 before COVID bisected the tour, that was a polarization that had a number of dimensions, but I had written a lot of that book in the Obama years. And so I was thinking during a lot of it, polarization over the Supreme Court, right? Polarization over Obamacare, polarization over taxes. I mean, you remember back when we used to talk a lot about the Grover Norquist tax pledge in Washington, and that was a big thing about how the parties were so divided. Compared to then, I think now we have less policy polarization and more system level polarization.
I agree with that.
The debate is less over taxes. I actually think we could do more. I mean, we'll see. Like the Republicans still like tax cuts and they're going to pass a big one. But in some theoretical way, I think if you follow the intellectual currents here, we are less polarized over things like Obamacare over tax.
People are asking about why do the captions look weird, and I have literally no idea. YouTube updated its the way it displays things, and it sucks, and I hate it.
But the question of whether or not the system itself is legitimate, I think, is highly, highly polarizing.
So you don't think we'll end up with one party that's the pro-NIMBY party?
No. And so this is an effort to do sort of two things compared to the other book. And Derek obviously will have his own versions of this. But one is at the end of my last book, my beloved wife, Annie Lowry, said to me, she's like, you don't really do any chin stroking in this book, right? It's all descriptive. You don't sort of say much about what you think the world should be. And that sort of rang in my head. And then the other was that I was sort of...
Damn, imagine being, like, owned by your wife that badly on the basic premise of your book. And then you just don't really solve it.
Watching, in my own view, polarization just kind of get more dysfunctional. I don't think polarization about the system itself is a healthy form of polarization. And so to the extent these two things have a relationship, it's a relationship to sort of describe a different cross-cutting cleavage than what we have. I would like to see fights between people who believe in what I would call different forms of abundance politics. I say in the introduction, right? I think you have a version of this in state capacity libertarianism. You can see Jim Bithakoukas on the right with his sort of the conservative futurist, right? There are different people I feel more allied with on the right, even if we don't have all the same views. As opposed to, I think, what we are actually having, which is over legitimacy, which I think is a pretty toxic form of division.
But is the abundance agenda primarily a view of elites? And insofar as it succeeds, it will succeed to the extent that politics is not directly ruled by democratic forces.
I don't know that I think that's true, but it's always a little bit true, right? So in my own head, I think
it's always a little bit true that, the elites run society and not, democracy. It's always a little bit true. Oh, that's so interesting. If only your book had anything to say about the power differentials, man. About the power differentials between, like, the elites and, like, everyday working people. If only your book took into account that power difference.
there are two kinds of policy and procedure overhang. One is the kind people actually want. A lot of NIMBYism is popular at the level at which it is happening. But then there's a kind that comes from drift. It doesn't end up being in the book, but I wrote a Times piece about this. I don't know if you tracked this story a while back, that there was this public toilet being built in Noe Valley in a park. I used to live near this park that was hooked up for water. And the cost estimate was $1.7 million. And they released a ribbon cutting for that. They came out to announce that they'd gotten the money from the state of California to build this $1.7 million toilet. And then my colleague Heather Knight, back then at the San Francisco Chronicle, reported on this, and people freaked out, right? They were not happy that the city had gotten $1.7 million for a toilet. They thought, why? And I went and tracked down, how does a toilet get to $1.7 million? One of the justifications from Rec and Parks and SF was, look, we've built all these other toilets that were $1.7 million, and nobody complained about that. And it's this kind of Baroque process where you have 7, 8, 9 agencies. You have all these, public comment periods, right? There are all these rules on, the grant proposal and how that goes out and what the procurement is and how do you do the bids on the contracts. Nobody asked for that, right? That's drift. That is.
And it's public EGAT.
Hell yeah. Thank you for the $10 super chat, Nathan Nielsen. Very much appreciated.
Process building on top of itself. That is nobody really having the power to say no or wanting to go through the difficulty of saying no. And so I cut that differently from some of there are places where people do not want to see an affordable housing complex built down the block. And then there are places where people would actually like to have a affordable public restroom next to the playground where their kids who I've been through this period in life very recently who are not fully potty trained play. And they're not like out there hoping that we can add $1.3 million in cost by process. They just don't really know that it has happened.
If the abundance agenda is to some extent an elite movement, it seems that high density, for the most part, is bad for elites. So in California, very wealthy elites, they want to move to Woodside. In Northern Virginia, they want to move to McLean. So does this mean the YIMBY part of the movement is just never going to get very far? That you can take a bunch of places, say near metro stops, and allow for somewhat denser housing, but it will stop there.
So is that true though, right? So I live in New York City now, and my sense is very wealthy elites, while they have a weekend house or vacation house, possibly in the Hamptons, they live in Manhattan in glass towers, or they've started to buy really expensive property in Brooklyn or in.
But that's one state, right? Country as a whole. The elites want the ranch 2 hours from Houston.
It seems they want both to me. I feel like.
Man, how fucking out of touch do you have to be to have this conversation? I just, the thing that bothers me here is that they are both so clearly in a different world where, like, the weird virgin obsessed guy is like, yeah, the elites want different things sometimes. And Ezra's just like, all the elites I know want both. And it's like, what about the vast majority of people, though? What do the vast majority of people want? Like, because here's the thing, right? If you want a cheap bathroom, you can get a porta potty. There are plenty of porta potties in parks in Minnesota. And guess what? They're not $1.7 million. But if you want to build like an actual building that has like working water and toilets, and you need to like buy the space and you need to like do all the things, yeah, your costs are going to balloon. But the premise is that then that building is there forever. That building is reliable. It doesn't need a ton of maintenance, outside of like occasional plumbing work. Like, just kind of seems like, yeah, there are other options, and like, your taxpayer dollars are to make your community better at the end of the day. Like, and if your community is like, yeah, we would like a permanent bathroom and not to use porta potties, okay, your elected representatives are there to make that happen. And if you're dissatisfied, like a lot of people were about the story that Ezra is referencing about this $1.7 million toilet, right? You can make your dissatisfaction known. And in the case that he is referring to, people did. And it brought the cost down by like $1 million. So like, I just, if anything, this kind of just shows like civic engagement is the path forward. And, even setting aside that this was all taking place in like San Francisco, and like San Francisco has some of the most expensive property on earth these days. And it's just kind of like, yeah. Like, I don't know, maybe San Francisco should spend several $1 million out of its budget to build more toilets that people can use so people aren't shitting in the streets. Just an idea.
Like the elites of DC live in McLean. That was true 20.
Like, even if you're going into like big cities like New York, and he's like referencing Manhattan and like the fancier parts of New York City, and like, guess what, guys? If you go to New York City and you go to those fancy parts, the toilets there suck too. Like, every single business that operates there requires you to buy something if you want to use the bathroom, and you have to ask for the code. Like, like you're asking for alms from like a passing feudal lord. It is uncomfortable and gross. It is genuinely a public good to have bathrooms that are just freely available to everyone, because guess what? People need to pee and poop. It's not like that's a natural bodily function, and people are going to need to do it when they're going about their daily business. And in a city as compact as San Francisco or New York, that's going to cost more money than building like a small hut in like, the Midwest that people can pee and poop in, like just like a little, side of the road rest stop. You can build that for not $1.7 million here in the Midwest, but like that's also, it's a different project due to the location.
Years ago, and it feels less true now. I mean, you still live there, but is that really what people do when they get rich in DC now? I feel like they buy expensive DC property because DC got safer.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, the entire premise of the abundance agenda that Ezra Klein put out there is undercut by the fact that the Trump administration, you're 100% right, Sticky Monkey Flowers. Like, we're spending ungodly amounts of money to arm ICE, bigger than some countries' entire military budgets is going to ICE. We spend, like, just on New York City cops alone, we spend the same as, like, some countries do on their entire military. And, like, we can afford to build $1.7 million bathrooms. That's not actually, like, a huge roadblock. It seems like a lot, but, like, people should be way more mad about how much money, like, ICE is getting in your public tax dollars. People should be getting a lot more mad about how much, police forces have ballooned over the last 20 years and how little it has improved safety. People should be getting mad at that, because that's where all of the tax money is going that could be used to improve your community, or give you free college education, or get you, like, Medicare for all. It's going into these eternal money sinks.
And, the food got better and all the things that everybody knows.
I think that's true. They may be more likely to live north on Connecticut Avenue, but they're still not angling for that to be much denser. Quite the contrary.
That might be right. I mean, look, I think that people, when they get rich, want space. And so to the extent that density makes it harder to have space, I think people are going to, at a certain level of wealth, probably have both a place in the city and a place a bit outside the city.
And, if they get to another super secret level of wealth, they have a place in the city, they have a place, kind of outside the city, and then they have, like, a special room on the space station.
What's the argument against the abundance agenda that most genuinely troubles you?
That it doesn't that I will admit this myself, that it does not know what to do about the question of voice. So one thing we're tracking in the book, there's a lot of great research on this from people like Zach Liskow and Leah Brooks, is that it is one of the key reasons it has become much more expensive and cumbersome to build is that over decades, we put into place all kinds of ways for citizens to exercise voice when something they don't like is happening. They can go to the planning board meeting, they can sue under the California Environmental Quality Act or sometimes under the National Environmental Policy Act. They can...
Yeah, the real problem here in America is people having too much agency to have a say in what happens in their community. What an insane argument to make. What an insane argument to make. Like, no, the biggest reason costs have increased is because of, like, land speculation, because of, like, the fact that, like, private investors are buying up land and, like, holding on to it. You know, like, it's a huge problem, like, all across the country, you know, where rich speculators will come in, buy up a place, a part of a city that they expect might one day be, like, gentrified, and then they just sit on that land and let it deteriorate until, like, oh, it's time to, like, try and make money, and they run it at a loss for the entire time, not renting it out to anyone, not improving it, etc. But they do it to make a bunch of money, and then when someone comes around to try and improve it, it suddenly, like, that makes the costs go way up. It's the speculation. It's the treating these areas that people live in as commodities themselves. It is commodifying, like, the entire process of getting these things built. Don't they also get tax deductions for those losses? No, they do for Axial. This is a problem in the part of the town that I live in, where, like, big speculative firms came in, they bought up, like, parts of the like businesses that aren't doing well, homes that are in disrepair, and then they just sit on it. They just sit on it and they write off the taxes as a loss, and it essentially, means that they never have to do anything with it. And, people can't open businesses there because they keep the leases very high so that, they can operate at a loss and get those tax cuts. It's all just the financialization of your neighborhood, and it's not the fault of, like, people in your community being able to come in and say, hey, actually, we don't want the smog generator in the middle of our neighborhood right next to the park our kids play in. That's not the main thing that is at fault here for building prices going up. And when he talks about, like, regulations imposing costs, it's regulations to make sure the buildings are safe. It's regulations to make sure that, like, buildings are up to code so that people aren't breathing in poisoned air, or, like, the building's not going to fall down if there's a freak earthquake. It's so frustrating.
There are just a million of these, depending on which particular process you're looking at. And on the one hand, you want that to be possible. You want it to be possible for people to come and say, this project will harm me. You do not want it. You don't want the government to be capable of being completely imperious. But one, it's very unrepresentative who shows up. The people, I mean, this is a classic example, but the people who show up to block an affordable housing complex are the people who live on that block now, not the people who would live on that block if the complex was built. And the second is it's just unrepresentative in other ways. Who has time, who has enough information to know the policies work. I am pretty familiar with, as I know you are, with the way federal regulations go through. And there's all kinds of public comment periods. And those public comment periods were built for the public to comment. But the people who actually know the public comment periods work are lobbyists, are special interests, or people who have the organized money to participate.
Yeah, so one might take a look at that and say, oh, wait, the power differential here favors the people with money and lobbying power. And gee whiz, I wonder who has more of that.
So it's tricky. You don't want to take away the opportunities for voice because it's very easy to tip into abusiveness, right? In some ways, having this book come out at the same moment that Elon Musk and Doge are doing things with, let's call it, very, very little public input, and very little agency input even, you can sort of see what the dark version of this, our mutual friend Steve Tellis calls what they're doing dark abundance. But it's with all these things, you're going to have to strike a balance. And it's hard to know how to strike the balance. I have a section on the sort of fiasco of high-speed rail in California. And towards the end of that, I say, look, China's built 23,000 miles of high-speed rail in the period of time that California was failing to build 500 miles. And on the one hand, all these things I'm describing happening in the California high-speed rail situation do not happen in China. They're just, if they want to move the storage facility, they just move it. They don't.
Yeah, because they have an authoritarian government. Because they will just confiscate the land people have that might be in the way of that. There might be like compensation like offered for land that might be appropriated, but like they're not like people aren't given a choice.
Go through years and years of lawsuits about moving it a couple feet back. That allows for a very imperial.
Like on the one hand, it's the fact that they have a government structure that allows them to do that, but also it's because they've invested the money and the material and the manpower, and they aren't, in these respects, they're not being nickeled and dimed by different contracting firms and lobbyist groups and like middlemen and I don't know. These are two very different systems to operate in.
Yes, and even abusive government of individual rights, and it also allows you to build trains. And so there are a lot of things here that are uncomfortably about striking a balance.
Yeah, you got to strike a balance between the authoritarianism and Look, what if we just did half authoritarianism, huh?
As opposed to saying we are all wrong the way we do it now, we would be all right if we did it this other way.
Look. Oh, okay, I'm just spitballing here, but what if we got an authoritarian who was liberal? What if we got a neoliberal authoritarian, huh? Would that be good? Sure, it'd be bad if we got like a fascist authoritarian, but what if we had like a liberal authoritarian, And then like we would just ensure that like no bad guy ever got in charge of the authoritarian machinery.
Do you worry that higher density, residential density, might lead to lower fertility? I don't think we know.
No. You can't call it semi-authoritarian because clearly this man wants trains, not semis.
I know that for sure, but it seems plausibly true. If you look at East Asia.
It seems to me that lower fertility is driven by women having more opportunities, and that.
Well, that was a really weird thing to say, man. That was a why are you talking about fertility? Hey, guy, what are you doing?
The both opportunity cost in leisure, money, pleasure, etc. of having children young goes up.
Well, that's clearly a factor. It might be the major factor.
And like Ezra Klein is like, well, people are waiting longer to have kids because like they want to have more fun when they're young, and like they're not ready to settle down yet, and like and he's like, no, let's get weirder with it.
But still, if you're in a smaller apartment, it's very hard to have 3 kids, say in Boston.
Is that true though? So my mom was out in New York recently, and one of the things, so my great grandparents, I guess it would be, lived in tenements in New York. And so we toured the Tenement Museum, which is a great tour to take because they have these sort of preserved tenements from that period. And these were very, very, very small places where you had, in the one we were in, I think it was 6 or 7 people, the family were living there, and there was a border, right?
This is honestly insane. The mask Ezra Klein puts on when he talks to left-leaning folks like completely falls away when he talks to conservatives. It's crazy. Yeah, dude is like, is it really that hard to have children in a tenement? Because people in my family did it, and they had 7 people in their family, and they brought in someone else to pay rent. And it's like, bitch, have you tried raising like 6 kids in one room? Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And like Ezra Klein is just sitting there smugly like, have you ever considered that maybe privacy isn't necessary if you want to have children? It's like, well, you're probably talking about a time period where people didn't have like condoms, man. Like people were just having unprotected sex all the time. Like they didn't want like 12 children. They just like, you think a human being wants to live? I'm sorry. Like I've taken care of children professionally, and like the idea that like, oh well, it's totally fine. I was a camp counselor. Like I stayed in the cabin with like the children at camp and made sure they were safe in the night, and like made sure like if they woke up, like people like they could go to the bathroom because like it was scary and spooky outside because it was in the woods, and like like I had that job, and so I had like sometimes 20 children in a one room situation. And let me tell you guys this, when you were doing that for just 5 days a week, that is some hard shit. That is difficult as hell. All right? Like, kids take a lot of effort. They take a lot of time. And, like, I'm sorry, but this was also the time where you were just like, you went to work and your kids were just like out on the street doing whatever, like forming their little kid gangs. And like, you can't do that these days. You can't just send like your 5-year-old out onto the streets of New York City. Like, what are you talking? What are you talking about, Ezra? Like, it was a bad idea back when they were doing the tenements. It's still a bad idea.
And that was very common. Now, I'm not saying, and if you go and you look in sort of high fertility immigrant communities, right? I used to live in San Francisco. You go down sort of further onto Daly City, things like that.
Oh man, why are you thinking about the fertility of different communities? That's really weird. It's really weird that you just like spat out the phrase high fertility immigrant communities.
People talk about this as very overcrowded, and on some level, certainly it is compared to the way I live. But in most places, people just live with less space. So I do think there's a cultural norm thing here, right? Density plus the norm that the kids all have their own room is going to be very, very bad for fertility. But
like I'm sorry, we're not talking about just like, every kid needs their own room. Like, bunk beds exist, but like the idea that like you should have like, oh man, you have a 2-bedroom apartment and like you want to raise 6 kids in it? That's nuts. What are you talking about? Very few people would choose that under those like constraints.
That's going to be another consequence of, I think, the almost feedback loop of low fertility societies. You begin to have expectations that cut against high fertility families.
I'm in NIMBY for Central Paris. Are you?
Probably for Central Paris, but I'd want to be very...
What does that mean?
Very careful about which places I became a NIMBY for. I'm a NIMBY for Big Sur, right? And I've been thinking about how do I resolve something like that?
What the hell is a NIMBY? It stands for not in my backyard. It stands for not in my backyard. It's like basically the idea of like, oh, I don't want like social improvements. Like don't put in the train station near here because then poor people might come to the neighborhood. Don't put in the low income apartment building because then that might bring down the property price of my house. Don't improve society somewhat because it might inconvenience me in some hypothetical way. Like they're the people who show up and advocate against like homeless shelters and like housing for the homeless. Like it's just they're pretty shitty. What is wrong with these people? Capital.
So the chapter on housing, which I'd be very curious for your thoughts about, but
Also, hello, Socrates.
Why are the birth rates falling? Why are people lonely? They ask unironically, when 1 in every 3 men talk this every day on women and fertility.
It's just like, I don't know, like why aren't people having more kids? I don't know. Maybe it's like the grip of capitalists trying to squeeze every last drop of blood from the stone of the working class. You know, like I don't know.
the chapter on housing, I try to make this argument that the cities are the frontier of the modern economy, that the frontier is not the edge of the landmass, but the places where ideas happen. And cities are broadly the places where ideas happen.
Well, okay, I don't think NIMBYs, like when we're talking about NIMBYs as like a group, like NIMBYism is related to specifically public improvements that they oppose because it would affect their property value. NIMBYism doesn't necessarily relate to like opposing the AI data center that's being built near your house. It's not opposing like the fucking smog factory going in that's going to dump toxic waste into your water supply. It's not the fracking tower that's going to poison your water or make your life awful, right? It is deliberately geared towards no social improvements, because that could lead to poor people coming here, and that will ruin our property values, you know?
And around those ideas are a lot of engines of mobility. And we've sort of thrown that process into reverse. I have this great research in there from Peter Ganong and Show.
Yeah, no, of course, Brooklyn to NW, like it's all about how like working class people are being nickeled and dimed, and wages have been stagnant for since Reagan was in office. And so like it is just the decoupling of wages from productivity winding up turning this entire society into one that cannot afford to have children. Like, I know, like, in my generation and the people I know, a lot of people want to have kids. They don't have the money. They don't have the money to have kids. Like, the medical bill alone to just have a child is prohibitively expensive. The medical bill just for the child delivery alone. That's not talking about, like, the preparation you need to raise a kid. That's not talking about, like, the college fund getting started. That's not talking about, like, covering the kid with insurance. That's not even talking about any of that. And so, like, people don't have $10,000 laying around generally. People don't have that. And, like, if... Like people need to work like 2 incomes just to make ends meet. And if that's the case, if you're barely getting by on 2 incomes, like, how the hell are you gonna have a kid? How? Like, I grew up with people whose like main life mission was to be like a dad or a mom, and like they can't afford it.
Who sort of show that over, decades, it used to be that we had income convergence across states, and that was driven by people moving from poor areas to richer areas. But now that is actually thrown into reverse as people leave lower income people.
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of people just say, just do it and figure it out as you go. But like, people don't want to just do it and like figure it out as they go. Generally, they want to know that they can give a kid the life that they deserve.
Richer areas for poor areas because the cost of living is so high. So we used to have this
like we can solve this problem of uncertainty by getting people like Medicare for all and housing for all, and like getting people like real living wages. It's not an impossible problem to solve.
Driver of mobility, which is people move to the high productivity, high income area, even if they themselves were poor. And now it's so hard to build a house there or buy a house there that they can't do that. And so the reason I bring that up is that I think you should have very different intuitions about places that are highly economically important compared to places that aren't. My view is not that every patch of land on Earth needs a high rise. My view is that there are a number of high density cities that play huge roles in idea generation and in economic mobility. And you should need to have an extremely good reason to make it very hard to build in them. So I'm not as familiar with Paris as you are. I'm a little bit familiar with Paris.
But you know it's lovely. That's all.
Yeah,
you
I know
need
it's
to
lovely.
know. Yeah.
But in Brooklyn and New York, we've made a huge swath of the land historic preservation, right? So I think you want to have a very high bar for what you're going to say is actually a beautiful, culturally important space worth preserving. There are some of them, and some of them are in Paris. But the question is, how do you set a limit on that? And different people have thought about that, right? Maybe you have only a certain number of designations, and it's functionally a cap and trade for historic importance. But I think you need something like that to protect against the creep of those designations covering, in effect, a quarter of these entire cities or half of these entire cities.
What do you think about the geographic distribution of U.S. cities? So as you know, for a country...
I guess what he's talking about there is like Paris has historic designations that make it hard to build new things inside of Paris, but like maybe the solution there isn't building like new things inside of Paris. It's like just expanding outward and like having walkable cities with good public transit. Like maybe the solution here is just have cities that citizens can traverse without cars, because so much space is used for the cars. Like I don't know, like there are a lot of wonderful things you can do when you start embracing like what New York City, has been embracing, like these policies that reduce traffic. The car, the car fare that people have to pay to drive into the city, like putting that fee on cars. Yeah, congestion pricing. Thank you. It was just not in my brain. Like that helps to make the city more walkable.
Evil, 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 evil capitalism and the exploitation and inhumane treatment of people. Evil, evil, am tired.
Indeed, Nathan Nielsen. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Very much appreciated. The point I was trying to make was congestion pricing lowers the amount of cars. It lowers the need for roads in particular. And if you can just close off part of a road, that is suddenly a whole lot of space you can use for a lot of different cool things. Pretty interesting. If the concern is space, it seems like the solution is improving public infrastructure and then getting it to a point where people don't need to rely on cars, and suddenly you have a lot more space to deal with.
Our size, our biggest cities are not actually that big. And we have a Nashville, and we have an Austin, and now there's a Chattanooga. Are the gains from that potentially...
A lot of illegal immigrants sneak over the southern border and buy up the luxury housing in cities and take all the tech jobs and don't work and collect Social Security. No, that's just the billionaires. That's just the billionaires.
High enough that it's okay to thwart more activity in or near New York City, in or near the Bay Area, and the geographic diversification of American intellectual and business life seems quite important to me.
I agree it seems important. It does not seem to me that our policy to force that into happening is all that good. I don't really know why. I think I probably am a little more skeptical on you on how well that dispersion is working. I think it is remarkable that New York does not have one significant AI company. Just remarkable. It doesn't even...
Oh, God, fuck. I didn't know that it was possible for my opinion of Ezra Klein to get lower. But like, holy shit. Like, I'm sorry, but like, I think it's remarkably significant that New York City doesn't have one significant AI company. It's just like, what? Why is that significant? All of these AI companies are losing literally hundreds of billions of dollars every year and require the entirety of all, like, investment capital on the planet in order to stay, like, at the current rate they are building and expanding into just next summer. And you think, like, oh man, you know what New York really needs? An AI company. All right. Oh, okay. Like, we'll see how that works out for you, buddy. Like, 35% of Wall Street is now made up of AI companies. that, 7 highly concentrated AI companies, and it seems kind of like that bubble gonna burst at some point.
Really have one significant tech company. The power of these agglomerations is so overwhelming and so sticky that I think you want to be very skeptical of the idea that if you begin to gate one of them, you will have constructive and productive spillover to just some other nearby secondary city. I love the secondary cities, but I don't think that's how you improve them.
But if we think about like our top 3 universities, say Harvard, MIT, Stanford, they're incredibly gated, right? They take very small numbers of people. They generate ideas at a world-beating pace. Nowhere in the world comes close to them. Doesn't that mean if you have good selection, the price is super high?
Just again, I my brain is stuck on this. Hey, Chad, is this good? I'm functionally illiterate. Is it good that the AI bubble is 17 times the size of the .com bubble? Is it good that it's 4 times worse than 2008? The 2008 financial collapse. If this bubble pops, when this bubble pops, is it good that we might have 4 times the intensity of the 2008 economic collapse? No, we really need an AI data center in New York City. That would solve our problems. Fuck. I hate these men so much.
Gating can be just fine, and people are free to go to plenty of other schools.
They are, but would they be better? Would Harvard be better or worse if it were twice as big? I think it would be better. I mean, I'm not sure what the limit on that is. There is some limit, but I don't think they're exactly where they should be. And I also think the question of universities is a little bit different because you do have this very early forcing mechanism, which is kids apply.
Hey, isn't that the creep who's excited for the AI virgin? Yes, it is the creep who's excited for the AI virgin actress and who has written previously about where one can find real-world virgins and said you need to look for a 22-year-old with a bachelor's degree. And one of his best friends is a guy who has advocated for gentle, silent rape. So, just 2 normal dudes talking. Just normal virgin poster, Tyler Cowen, and abundance-pilled Ezra Klein.
They have to go somewhere. And if they can't go to Harvard, they're going to pick the next one down. Whereas with a lot of what we're seeing in the cities, what happens is that people live in far-flung ways, further out from the city. You spend an hour and a half in traffic every day, right? It's not that having applied to have your job in San Francisco and been rejected, your second best is Reno. You might live, an hour and a half out, and that might be a pretty hard.
Yeah, buying some rice and beans, not the worst idea. Rice and beans stay good for a very long time.
Life for you. I think this is something that a lot of measures of affordability miss. Annie has written great pieces about this for The Atlantic. She calls it the wrong apartment problem. That you can run a measure of housing affordability and find people who do not actually look that rent burdened, but in practice, they're living 97 minutes away from the place they would like to live in order to be able to afford the home. And I think we should see that as a pretty big public policy failure.
Here's a question from a reader, and I'm paraphrasing. I can see why you would favor Obamacare and an abundance agenda.
Yeah, if somebody's living 97 minutes away, it kind of seems like maybe the solution is better public transit so that they can live closer. I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe they can live closer without a car.
Because Obamacare throws a lot more resources at the healthcare sector. In some ways, it did have Medicare cuts, but nonetheless, it's not choking the sector. But if you favor an abundance agenda, can you then possibly favor single-payer health insurance through the government, which does tend to choke resources and stifle innovation?
I think it'd depend on how you...
Yeah, by the way, in case any of you were wondering, Tyler Cowen is a libertarian. He's a libertarian economist, and so he's going to say some crazy shit like that.
Did the single payer healthcare. So one, I think and here we should talk about because it's referenced glancingly in the book and a place where you and I differ, but the supervillain view, right, that I hold in your view, which is that you should negotiate drug prices. And I think, and I've always thought on that, because I think in some ways it's a better toy example than single payer versus Obamacare. I think you want to take the amount of innovation you're getting very, very, very seriously. And so I've written.
You know what's crazy to me? Like, again, like the idea, like, oh, you need to look. If you don't give the pharmaceutical companies, like $1 bajillion, like they aren't going to invest anymore. And it's like, well, wait a minute, why? Like, if the pharmaceutical companies aren't going to do their job and develop new pharmaceuticals, like, okay, then the U.S. government will do it. Like, the U.S. government has subsidized.
Pervert looks like post Me Too H John Benjamin.
It's true, Pluvius. Thank you for the $5 dono. Wait, just to be clear, John Benjamin hasn't been Me Too'd, right? Like Bob from Bob's Burgers hasn't been Me Too'd, right? I don't know if my heart can take that right now. No, I don't think so. Thank God.
Pieces about this that I think if you're going to do Medicare drug pricing at any kind of significant level, you want to be pairing that with a pretty significant agenda to make drug discovery much easier, to make testing much easier, right? A huge number of the choke points that make it hard to discover new pharmaceuticals is not that if you could do it, you can't make money off of it. It's that it is very, 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 very cumbersome to take flyers on these drugs. Like we could have had the GLP-1s decades ago.
That seems like a pretty compelling argument for the government to just step in and do the research, right? Like if your argument is essentially like, well, the pharmaceutical companies aren't, doing the necessary investments in order to get us the technology, like, then why are we leaving it to private industry to do this? Like, why not do it publicly? Why not fund the research directly, and then you can just, make that back slightly by selling the drugs to like slightly above their rate of manufacturing cost? Like, what? I just don't understand. I don't understand this insistence that like the only thing that could possibly come up with pharmaceuticals is a privately owned or publicly traded company. That seems ludicrous to me.
But there are a lot of reasons within the system that, it would have been costly to try that out. Heidi Williams, who we both know has some very, I think, good ideas for doing this. I think a huge failure of the
it's not even like, oh man, we've never tried this out. Like, no, we basically heavily subsidize pharmaceutical research right now. It'd just be a matter of taking on the additional burden. It'd be a matter of like, instead of giving private companies like the ability to patent medicine that like the US government like basically made possible with our tax dollars, like instead like the US government keeps the patent. Instead the US government, like, until like the investment is made back. Like, it just seems like there are ways to do this, but there's so much deference paid to capital and private industry that like Ezra Klein is just blind to those possibilities.
We talk about healthcare, what we call healthcare reform,
like if you give your population life-saving medicine, you make the money back by keeping them alive. Exactly, Salmon Moose.
Always health insurance reform. And we are extremely focused.
It's the basic premise of Medicare for all, but like on a larger scale. Like it's profitable. It is more efficient. You get more back than you put in when you do a Medicare for all program, because then people can go and get preventative care, and then you don't need to utilize as much health care.
On the question of, can somebody go in and afford the hospital bill, which is good. I want them to be able to afford the hospital bill, and not what is that hospital actually providing to them, and what is it that we can put in place in the system at sort of every.
I don't know why, but I'm hearing What If Alt Hist tone in his voice. Oh no, somebody else referenced hearing What If Alt Hist because they were like doing something and not looking at the screen when we were covering an Ezra Klein segment. I think they just have a similar cadence.
Level to make sure the pace of drug discovery, to make sure the pace of drug advancements is going really well. We spend some time in one of the chapters Derek wrote on the story of Operation Warp Speed. And I always find two things really remarkable about that story. One is that they really did quite a bit under Donald Trump, and it's very unfortunate, I think, that this both policy and structure of policy got disowned afterwards. But they did quite a bit speed the ability to not just bring these things to research and to market, but the government was very active in there trying to figure out how to make sure supply constraints and secondary items like vials, because, the vials need to be refrigerated and so on, that it wouldn't retard the rollout. And so the government there was acting in many ways as what Derek called a bottleneck detective. Months later, I was talking to some of the people who were working on trying to create pan-coronavirus vaccines. And this doesn't seem to have panned out. And I don't know if it didn't pan out exactly because they weren't able to figure it out or because of what I'm about to say, but they just described, and this was still when COVID was very, very live in people's minds. Here are these people working on a vaccine that could have genuinely ended the threat. And they described spending so much of their time, among other things, sourcing monkeys because they just could not find the monkeys they needed to test the vaccines on. So to me, and then, so that was...
Oh no. Are you about to argue that they should have been able to just go straight to human testing? Are you about to argue that we need to cut the red tape of sourcing monkeys for medical testing? No, Ezra, no!
Soulless fake intellectualism has a certain vibe to it.
It really does, Nathan Nielsen. Thank you for the $10 super chat. I really appreciate the support. Really do.
One side of it. I thought the government was doing a good job on that with Operation Warp Speed. And then when it came out, because the government had done a lot for it, there was a very strong equity component in it. When that came out, it was not that the richest people were the only ones who could get COVID vaccines. I mean, if you were wealthy and connected, it was a bit easier for you. But the cost of that vaccine at the beginning was zero. And it was zero for everybody in America. And people could go and they could get it at CVS. I mean, we really did pair a aggressive supply side policy with an aggressive demand side policy. And I don't think we do that enough. And in my critique, at least of my side of this.
Well, yeah, but the reason they were getting paid a lot of money by the US government to make it free in a way that we wouldn't if the US government just developed the vaccine in-house. Then we would cut out the middleman that we have to pay for the vaccine, and it would have been cheaper, and then we wouldn't have needed, the prices on the vaccines have risen because, the current government doesn't view it as, of paramount importance to the economy that people be vaccinated like that, and now it costs more money, and people are worried about not being able to afford it. We could avoid this situation entirely by just publicly owning what we invested in.
I think liberalism doesn't do this enough. It will often ask, how can we make it so people can afford something, but not how can we make sure there is enough of the thing? And also, how can we make sure there is value in the thing that right now there isn't because we haven't done sufficient innovations? So the question of single payer and the system, it's well, did you radically increase the number of medical residency slots, right? What kinds of things are you doing inside the innovation system and inside the way we bring devices and drugs to market? And then, the point I think that you're making or that your reader is making, if you drive the price of things too far down, you are going to create shortages of them and you are going to reduce the incentives to innovate in the future. And you have to be very thoughtful and careful about that.
But that's not an accident. If you look at the pure or single-payer systems, Canada or the UK, they're very fiscally strapped. They grossly underinvest. Most of the incentives are to stint and drive down prices.
Yeah, but, can we take a look at why their healthcare systems are strapped, why they underinvest in the healthcare, and why they underinvest in pharmaceutical development? It's because of the austerity. It's because austerity conservatives come in and cut everything and make the services worse and worse and worse and more backed up and longer lines and worse and worse and worse. And those austerity conservatives are funded by billionaires, the same billionaires who are funding Tyler Cowen's show. The same billionaires who are funding, the current Trump administration and its efforts to cut everything, because the entire premise of conservative ideas under capitalism is to facilitate the ever-growing, all-consuming capital of the wealthiest people on the planet. That is it. That is it. Like some kind of all-consuming fungus.
and not actually want to see too much innovation. In Canada, they even send a lot of people to their deaths under possibly dubious circumstances, which is a pretty radical place to end up in. So why trust these systems?
Yeah, who got sent to their deaths, just out of curiosity, in Canada? Who got sent to their deaths? Oh, what was it the poor? Was it poor people? Oh, it was poor people who, because of the cuts and the austerity, did not have any option to improve their lives, and so felt like they had no other way out. Oh, you mean they were also victims of the same exact austerity conservative politics that you're talking roundabout ignoring when you talk about pharmaceuticals?
To fine-tune where the incentives ought to be when they're just basically fiscally, if not quite broke, badly ailing.
My view has always been that you want a floor, not a ceiling on your system. So I've never actually been a supporter of, people often mean different things when they say single payer systems, but when we're really talking about something like Canada or the NHS, that's never been the structure I would move towards. I much prefer the kind of system you see in a place like France.
Man, why are you even making, I don't get this. Why are you making appeals to France? Why are you making appeals to other countries? Man, we have a government program that just provides health insurance. It's called Medicare. The only thing that is required is that we consistently lower the age of when you become eligible
United
for Medicare.
Healthcare
That's
kills
it.
a 9/11's worth of people every day because of denial of coverage, which, mind you, is controlled by AI at a 90% error rate.
100%, Pluvius. Thank you for the $5 dono. I really appreciate it.
Capitalism may not be the root of all evil, but it sure does incentivize it. P.S. Have you considered putting in text-to-speech on $5 donations? I want to talk more Lamau.
I have considered it. Thank you for the $10 super chat. I really do appreciate it. You don't have to look at a different country. We have a system that can easily be expanded to encompass everyone as a Medicare for All program. That's it. Full stop. We already have that.
Where what you have is a significant healthcare, a basic provision floor, and a huge amount of the value of healthcare comes out of basic healthcare. And then you have supplementary insurance, which you can buy on the open market, and people do, or if you can't afford it, there are subsidized versions of it. And so you have a kind of...
Can we also just talk real quick? One of the reasons I want to focus on Ezra Klein and abundance is because this is the fight. This is where the fight is within the Democratic Party. This is where it is. When we talk about, opposing neolibs and centrists and stuff like that, the Democratic do-nothings, this is the ideology of them. This is the ideology of the Democratic do-nothings. This is just their attempt to rebrand. And I wanted to point this out, right? That one of the things to know about Tyler Cowen, and I maybe I have waited too long to introduce this, is that he is one of those libertarians, he's had on Peter Thiel. Should tell you kind of where he's coming from here. He is one of those Balaji Srinivasan types. He believes in the network state. He is one of those people who believes in this techno-feudalistic idea where the wealthiest billionaire techno bros are going to be essentially carving up the world into little fiefdoms. And what I realized here in this conversation is that Ezra Klein and Tyler Cowen are just two different sides of the same coin. That ultimately, Ezra Klein, I've been calling him a conservative, and I stand by that. I think he embraces conservative ideals. But ultimately, what he's doing is embracing and trying to make palatable these techno-feudalistic ideas. Oh yeah, just cut the red tape of government. The companies will figure out. They'll invest. All of this abundance shit is just an attempt to repackage network state, these network state ideas into something that is more palatable to neoliberals and centrists, to the Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries of the world. And I find that fascinating and also very dangerous. And I've been trying to figure out how to word my opposition to this idea more succinctly, and I think that's it. He is just one of the propagandists of this new political movement in favor of techno-oligarchs essentially running the world with as little to no red tape as possible in their little enclaves where they can just do what they want to do.
Of what I used to describe as a floor without a ceiling. And so I prefer multi-payer systems. I do want things provided universally at a basic level. And then I do think for some people who can't afford above that, there should be public provision of it. I think you want to be very, very careful about not having any exit from either the government pricing regime or the structure of government insurance. Because there are things that come into the system that it's hard to know how to ration them. It's hard to know how to provide them. And you do want to make sure there is sufficient incentive to develop them.
What if someone said a true abundance agenda? And of course, this could never happen, but it's basically to zero out Medicare and Medicaid, which is a lot of money, right? And spend all of that on science and birth subsidies and Social Security, for that matter. Why isn't that the true abundance agenda?
So the true abundance agenda would be to zero out Medicare, Medicaid. And
Christian Scientists, they still have decent life expectancy, right? People would have maybe higher Social Security. They could still buy health care. We'd have many.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Prop Games 625, thank you very much for the membership. Basically what he's saying here, guys, is, have you ever thought about getting rid of Medicaid and Medicare and people who don't have any kind of healthcare coverage? They still have decent life expectancies, and the answer is that they don't. The life expectancy of Christian Scientists is very low because most of them, a lot of them, die in childhood. And yeah, sure, if you live through the gauntlet of being a child and make it to adulthood, maybe you got a decent life expectancy, but that's a lot of kids dying, And so, but what he's saying here is, what if we just got rid of any kind of healthcare coverage, and instead healthcare was only something the wealthiest people could have, and also we would give out birth subsidies so people would be paid to have more children. And he's thinking of people as, essentially cogs in a machine that are replaceable, not as people that are, unique and interesting and worth having exist in the world. He's talking about them, as a libertarian does, Incidentally, he talks about virgins as a libertarian does as well. This is where a lot of this conservatism, this techno-feudalism goes, where anyone who's not in the upper crust of society is essentially an interchangeable cog, and when that fuse burns out, you just put a new one in. They talk about people like they're machines or bits of machinery.
More people, it'd be a much younger society, more dynamic society.
Oh man, I wonder why this guy wants a younger society. Who can say?
Scientific advances would mean we'd cure many more diseases, forms of cancer. People would probably live longer. Why not do that?
People would probably live longer. We'd cure so many more diseases because no one would have healthcare anymore.
Just go crazy on innovation and number of births.
Well, one, I think that's hugely probably a false choice, right? You can fund.
Why are you taking this man seriously? He just said, why don't we throw everyone off of healthcare and have no healthcare coverage, and like everything will work itself out. That's insane. That's an insane position to have. Treating this man as a good faith interlocutor after this point is just foolishness. And like, frankly, you shouldn't have been on this guy's show in the first place, given his past public statements.
Innovation, but if you don't have provision of healthcare, I mean, this is the other side of...
Yeah, look, guys, if we just didn't have Medicaid or Medicare, we'd be able to afford all the new med beds.
Your arguments about drug pricing, but your view is that you get a huge innovation signal from the fact that in a rich country, virtually everybody, and certainly all older people, have healthcare, and they're able to buy it. So one, I don't buy that you could close down Medicare and Medicaid without substantially harming innovation. Also, I just don't. But yes, I don't buy that on a political level at all.
It's not going to happen. But you could have prizes for really good drugs, right?
But it doesn't fit my politics, right?
You could have prizes for really good drugs. I'm sorry, this is like a 12-year-old's conception of society. Even within a capitalist framework, like the prize for a really good drug is a lot of profit. That's the prize for a good drug, man. You know, like we already do that. But like, you could also have a prize for a good drug for like the scientists who invent it if it was publicly funded. Who is this guy? This is the like AI virgin guy.
But why not?
Abundance is a corrective to where we are, because I do care about equity. This is a debate. Robin Hansen and I used to argue about this back when he was big on...
Robin Hansen? Wait a minute, Jack. Why? Where do I remember the name Robin Hansen from? Oh yeah, it's this guy. The gentle silent rape guy. Oh! You know, just a fun little debate. You know, like, you know, why... I wonder if Ezra Klein ever debated him on that one. Wonder why Ezra Klein's just referencing like an economic debate with that man instead of like a...
Reminds me of when Trump wanted to let Corona wash over America. Okay, I'll stop donating for a while.
God, no, but like that's it. Like it's the same mindset, Nathan Nielsen. It's the same mindset. Like it is the like let the chips land where they may. You know, everyone dies. You know, just let the working class perish, and you know we'll protect all of the wealthy. And you know, like it's fine. You can just birth a new generation of workers. In their minds, that's how they think about it. Also, thank you for the $10 super chat. Also, just for the record, you can do a $5 dono to like have text to speech read it out. It can't be a $4.99 dono. It has to be a $5 or above dono. That's like maybe the issue you're running into.
His healthcare is all signaling tip, and I think there's something to the fact that some of healthcare is signaling, but healthcare plays a lot of roles for people. One of the huge roles, in addition, beyond the...
I'm sorry, I was too hung up on the fact that Ezra Klein brought up this ghoul Robin Hansen.
Hansen and I used to argue about this back when he was big on his healthcare is all signaling tip, and I think there's something to the fact that some of healthcare is signaling, but healthcare plays a lot of roles for people. One of the huge roles, in addition, beyond the roles it directly plays in treating people with disease. And
yeah, true. If you can't do a $5 super chat for whatever reason, you can come over to riverboat.gg and do a $5 super chat or $5 text to speech.
Treating people who need pharmaceuticals and so on, is that the amount of anxiety, fear, etc. people have when they are sick is tremendous. And one thing we see in a lot of different studies and a lot of different research around health is that one of the main ways healthcare affects well-being is it reduces anxiety and depression, particularly around when people get sick. And I mean, think of anybody in your life, how they begin to act when they get sick. Throwing people to the wolves on that and saying, don't worry, we're investing a lot in basic R&D is not compassionate and humane. So
but you're going to cure a lot more cancers, say, right? If you're talking about equity.
No, because you're not going to be curing an awful lot of cancer. right? Like, you can say, like, oh my god,
I
my
am
brain
so
is hurting.
fascinated that they keep contradicting themselves throughout this interview while acting this smug.
It is fascinating, Andrew S., because, like, this guy's like, well, you'll cure a lot more cancers. No, you won't, because most people won't have healthcare, so most people aren't going to get their cancer cured. This is blindingly obvious, but if they aren't able to access the cures that are being discovered, then what's the fucking point? Like it just becomes knowledge for its own sake, or knowledge that is gatekept behind the doors that are only able to be opened by the billionaires. Yeah, Ezra Klein is coming across as the reasonable one, and his ideas are terrible.
The person who dies at age 46 of cancer, Medicare doesn't save them. That's true inequity.
Medicare could, oh my god. Yeah, Medicare doesn't save them because they aren't old enough to qualify for Medicare, but you know what would help them to be saved by Medicare? If we just lowered the age of when you're eligible to be for Medicare. We could lower, we as a society can lower it all the way down to 0.
Bet.
God damn it. Nathan, thank you for the $5 dono. Andrew S., thank you for the $5 super chat. God damn it, this is infuriating.
Could increase defense spending, which would help many much poorer places around.
Can I reiterate that this man and his show are both supported by a Koch brothers funded outfit at one of the largest economics institutions in the United States, and like his ideas are this bad? His ideas are this bad? Like this man is an economics professor at one of the largest universities in the country, and is backed by billionaire money, and is in conversation with billionaires, and his ideas are, what if we just let everyone who's poor die? What if we just let everyone die of preventable illnesses except for the rich? That's insane, dog. Like, how do you have the same ideology of Ebenezer Scrooge at the beginning of A Christmas Carol in 2025? Like, yeah, no, like Rex Parka, like, I when I was in high school, I had a lot of very conservative ideas, but like, this is like child level conversations about these ideas. This is like what a 12-year-old would think about. This is nuts. Yeah, when you say eugenics without saying it. Exactly. No, like, the survival of the fittest. And obviously these two men would be the fittest.
In the world, it seems the opposite of equity, especially Medicare, to channel so much money to relatively wealthy older people who for sure have gotten in 65 years of life.
Yeah, I just don't buy that.
What? Well, then how about we channel it to everyone of every age? How about we do that? How about we do that, man? Fuck.
You should begin to so radically discount the life and life quality of older people. I mean, as you know, people.
Also, this man's about on the verge of receiving Social Security. Is he gonna like forgo it, or is he gonna Ayn Rand it?
Who are older end up at the doctor quite a lot, and putting them sort of back out on the street on that, I don't think would work. Look, the point that I could come up with versions of this that I think would in some ways be a tougher philosophical test, right? What you just said, right? What if you begin to cut out half of defense spending and you move it into public health subsidies for the poor worldwide, right? Or or for that matter, you could do that with Medicare and Medicaid, and all of a sudden PEPFAR is covering everything for everybody under the poverty line in the entire world. There's a certain nationalism in this, right? I do believe you have to take care of your people, but I think that once you have accepted the basic view, as I have, that health insurance is a way that is valuable.
Like, I'm just, okay, like, can we just like do a quick thing? Like, if one, you don't need to even slash defense spending in order to get a Medicare for all situation. Okay, you just don't need to do that. Medicare for all is the cheaper option to what we pay right now. Okay? It actually saves us money to do Medicare for all, right? And on top of that, okay, the idea that like, oh man, just like slash our defense spending. Actually, yeah. if you are spending, if we spent half of our defense budget or 3/4 of our defense budget on like ensuring that like areas of the world that are completely and utterly poverty stricken are like getting built up and people aren't dying and of preventable illnesses and famine, like we could like improve global stability. People would actually like us. It'd be great if we ballooned the budget of USAID to like, you know, $600 billion. Like, do you know how much like that could improve the lives and how many lives that could save? How much like infrastructure we could build? Like, the world could be such a better place.
Valuable to take care of people, both in terms of their life outcomes and in terms of the quality of life they lead, then I think you're in a place where...
And by the way, in turn, that would mean that we'd have to spend less money on our military, like, and we could slash it even further, because by stabilizing unstable parts of the world, like, and building like mutual friendship and allyship amongst the other nations, we could actually like not spend so much of our money on national defense. One of the things I have long believed is that like if you want to actually spend on national defense, you don't need to spend most of your money on guns or bombs or planes or tanks or nukes. You need to spend most of your money on like stabilizing other parts of the world and like helping other people, because like that will ultimately be what keeps you safe.
Zeroing it out for poor and elderly people is a bad idea on the merits, and also obviously a horrific idea politically. But abundance is not just a relentless expansion of supply. You know, I do want to say that, because...
Wasn't it like some hundreds of millions to solve food hunger, world hunger? Yeah. No, I think it was like $3 billion or $9 billion or something, but like we could do that easy. We could do that so easy. Why aren't we doing that?
You can push anything. One of the critiques I'm getting on the left is funnily the opposite of the critique that you're, or at least a thought experiment you're offering, which is, oh, you know, here come Ezra and Derek saying all that matters is how many solar panels we build and how many drugs we invent and, you know, how many trains we build. And, you know, what about, you know, the child tax credit? What about childcare for everyone? And the theory here is not meant to replace every other argument in American, or for that matter, global politics. It doesn't say you don't need to think about child tax credits, which I intensely support. It doesn't mean you don't have to think about the provision of health insurance. It doesn't mean you don't have to think about the provision of public education. There are a certain set of problems that have become very binding on a certain set of policy things that people who believe what I believe about the world should care about. I mean, I'm a Californian. I lived in California for much of the writing of this book. California is a place deranged by supply constraints. And the fact that it is deranged by supply constraints, by the inability to build high-speed rail, by the inability to build homes, by the inability to build clean energy at anything like the pace needed to reach the goals California itself has set for itself, should be seen as a real problem. It doesn't mean it...
Yeah, but part of the issue here, when you are comparing like what China does to like what the United States does, is that like ultimately we're relying on private companies to meet these standards. When like what is required is like a state level or even a federal level jobs program to build these as public works projects. Not as like, you know, oh, like a company now owns the solar panel field or whatever and can now like price gouge consumers. No, like make it a public works project that benefits the public. You can do that when you're the government. You don't have to turn a profit as the government. All it has to do is serve the people.
Replaces the problem or completely moves
You know what's the fucked up thing about this, Caranale MD? Is that, and I probably mispronounced your username, I'm sorry. We are less than halfway through this because so much of what they say is utter bullshit. Utter conservative nonsense. And like, we haven't even gotten to the part, we're about to transition into the part where I'm like, oh no. which is where we're going to talk about birth. You know, this virgin-obsessed weirdo is about to start talking about birth rates.
It out of anything on the demand side or the subsidy side of the system, but it is a thing that if you are a liberal, I think, who wants to be honest about the problems of liberal governance, you have to confront.
But with all the talk of supply constraints, shouldn't you, of all people, be obsessed with fertility decline? It makes everything.
The weirdest people on Earth are obsessed with fertility decline. The weirdest possible people on Earth are the ones talking about fertility rates. I've already covered it. There's a video where I go over like the weird natalists that keep popping up everywhere who have an insane like eugenics and Nazified YouTube channel. It's really gross. They're really disgusting.
But also with thunder, please.
Exactly. Nathan, thank you for the $5 dono. Very much appreciated.
Thing unaffordable. It limits market size. Okay, so then we need to take money from somewhere and spend it on birth subsidies. I'm saying take it from Medicare.
Do you think birth subsidies work?
We don't know. I think we need to try them more and more extreme.
I am extremely open to birth subsidies. The question of where you should take them from.
You know what would be a great idea for a birth subsidy? Considering it costs like $10,000 for like someone who's uninsured to have like a birth in a hospital with medical care. You could consider like a birth subsidy, like some kind of perk of implementing a Medicare for all system. You know, like if we had a Medicare for all system, then you could just have babies and not worry about how much it's going to cost you to have babies. Universal health care would solve the problem, right? Like, it eliminates that one financial barrier, and then we can get to work on, like, livable wages. You know, paying people a living wage and giving them health care. Excellent way to do this. Yeah, free child care on top of it. And you know what? We can do that. We're doing it right now. New Mexico is trying to pass it right now. They have a highly successful program that they want to implement. And like, these people sit around talking like, oh man, there's just no way we could possibly eliminate these barriers. And it's like, man, did New Mexico successfully pass it? Did it pass like today? Oh, okay. It begins in November. That's so cool. So they have passed it, and it like the program is being implemented in November. That's awesome. Good on you, New Mexico. So like we actually have it already.
The budget is an interesting one, but I'm extremely open to birth subsidies. I think people should be paid for being parents. Part of why people do not have children earlier is that it's a huge, and particularly for women, a huge financial penalty that is lifelong. I am not sure we know, though, whether or not there's a birth subsidy at a
level. Oh, they passed it literally yesterday. Okay, the last I had heard, it was going to a vote. Cool.
That is politically in any way viable that actually works. I would love to see any country in the world pass some non-authoritarian, like non-Romanian, decades ago policy that seemed to have an effect on birth rates. I do think we're going to have.
There are policies that affect birth rates. It's you eliminate the financial barriers. You eliminate the financial barriers. And then, like, if you're still having problems, then you offer financial incentives. Like, my head hurts. Also, Disaster Suplex, I really like your username.
I think we are going to have severe political problems as societies shrink. And I, like, in my own sort of moral framework, I think the continuation of human experience is a beautiful and important thing, and the way it has just been absorbed into a kind of.
I'm sorry, like the idea that like humanity as a species isn't going to survive because the birth rates are just going to plummet to zero. There's just nothing to support this. Like, give people more free time. Give people like the space to intermingle. Give people like free healthcare and like free childcare and like a place to live and lower their stress levels. And you know what? People are going to have more kids. We commodify every moment of our time. And like maybe one of the biggest barriers to having children is time commodification under capitalism, where, like, you know, had the saying, like, time is money. Like, it, as you become, like, wealthier, right, your time is worth more money. And so some people who, even if they hit, like, a certain level of wealth, they feel compelled to continue to work, because if they're not working, they're losing so much money, you know? And so, like, there's like, and I know that's like a kind of a basic lens to look at this through, but, like, people feel the need to commodify their hobbies, to commodify their time with friends, to commodify, you know, just they're walking around or, like, driving to work. And it's just like, that's stressful all the time. And the reason people feel compelled to do that is because the cost of failure under capitalism is that you suffer and die. You suffer, you are tortured by destitution. And, like, that's, no one wants that. No one wants to be in that situation, and the only thing that keeps you from being in that situation is money. And, like, that seems like a particularly cruel and awful way to structure a society, and yet that is the society we have found ourselves in. And, like, that structure makes it real hard to have kids. Well, and that's true, Ivan Holmes. Like, anyone who is very concerned about the birth rates is, I mean, it's a sideways way to inject white nationalism into a conversation.
Liberal expressive.
Because, again, if you go to, like, any of those natalist conventions, they are extraordinarily white, and they are extraordinarily interested in only having, you know, white, wealthy babies. That's it.
Individualism, right? I hear people talk about it as if it's like a good that is akin to whether or not they should take an international trip, right? What are the cost benefits?
But, Jack, I must commodify my mini painting, otherwise it's wasting time. Yeah, but, like some people like genuinely feel that way, you know? In a world in which time is money, like, refusing to commodify your time is a revolutionary act.
I think that's mistaken. So I'm pro trying to think about fertility. I just have not seen any policies at work.
But the more uncertain we are about birth subsidies, and I agree that's the correct view, doesn't that mean we should all the more commit to some kind of revival of cultural conservatism on matters of family?
Yes, by offering birth subsidies, can you not admit that we must all become conservative in order to accept the subsidies?
There's an asymmetric pairing. Families should sort of be expected to have 3 or 4 children, and that's the alternative. And yes, we should try subsidies, but the more uncertain we are, we've just got to go, you know, the Ross Douthat route. I think he has 5 kids now. Good for him.
I think it would. So I don't think this is wrong. I just don't think it's doable. I listened to a fascinating interview between Barry Weiss and Louise Perry recently. It was
Of course you find Barry Weiss to be fascinating. You vacuous hack.
Valentine's Day interview on Barry's podcast, honestly. And Louise Perry, for people who don't know her, is a sort of kind of conservative British, heterodox feminist thinker. I don't exactly know.
Emergent Ventures winner also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's great.
So she was sort of saying towards the end, as Barry...
Just out of curiosity, I have no idea who this is. I'm gonna look her up. I'm gonna look up Louise Perry, just out of curiosity. Oh boy. So, this lady, this lady is vocally anti-porn. Is also, I gotta be honest. Seems like a turf situation. In September of 2025, Perry publicly announced her conversion to Christianity. In an interview for the MacDonald Laurier Institute's Inside Policy Talks podcast, she explained that her decision was influenced by observing how Christian teachings correspond with sociological realities, particularly in relation to sex differences. Perry stated, quote, "I realized that if Christianity is supernaturally true, you would expect it to be sociologically true, and observing quite how sociologically true it was, very persuasive to me." And she noted her views increasingly aligned with Christian natural law, which is just like Christian natural law is just like bonkers shit. And we are not going to get into the weeds on that, but like I'm not surprised that Ezra Klein described her in this way.
He was pushing her on solutions because
He's great.
So is she a feminist thinker? I don't exactly know.
Emergent Ventures winner also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's great.
So she was sort of saying towards the end, as Barry was pushing her on solutions, because she's making some points. She's more thinking about the kind of sexual relationships, the relationships between men and women in this podcast more than birth rates. But she's saying things like birth control, at least a pill. It's not that it should be banned. It should only be available for married women. That it is good for married women to be able to space out children, but we should not.
Just in case any of you are wondering, she literally wrote an article titled "Transgenderism is Over." Cool.
Take so much of the weight and the stakes and the incentive to...
Well, let me just put it this way. I'm not surprised that Ezra Klein thinks she's great.
Marry off of the singles dating market. Now, it's obviously not my view, but I think it gets to what I don't think is going to work in.
Can we just also take a moment where Ezra Klein is trying to give additional oxygen to this idea that
oh no, my asterisk. Also, anyone who uses opposition to degeneracy as a reason for anything should not be listened to at lead, not without a very large grain of salt.
Ezra Klein was like, oh yes, your argument is that unmarried women shouldn't have access to birth control. Yes, what a fascinating idea. Let me engage with that seriously, like it came from a serious person. And not the mind of a 12-year-old, which is the intellectual level this entire conversation is at.
In the view you're describing here, which is when...
What if we just locked down single people with children and then forced them to get married? Clearly, this is great. This is a great plan. Nothing wrong here at all.
Society and technology have changed so much when you have things like the pill, when you have the opportunities we now have for people to live lives of real sort of expressionism, of sort of building their identity around work, which we train people to do from a very early age. I don't know that there is a way to insert an ethic, a kind of cultural application of shaming or, remoralization around this that will substantially change behavior. If there was, I think some society already would have done it effectively. Now, Ross, right, and sort of the societies I think we would talk about here, that's coming from religion. It's not coming from just cultural conservatism. It's coming from religion. And religion is very, very, very powerful, but I don't know how we re-religionize people, right? Getting people to actually believe is different than telling them in an abstract way that, birth outcomes are better and sort of society is more cohesive in Utah, where the influence of the Church of Latter-day Saints is still very strong. So I actually think...
How is this man an intellectual that is propped up in any esteem? It's beyond me. How is he not laughed out of every academic room in which he postures? It's oh my God.
I think the sort of idea that we should just move back to a more shaming cultural conservatism has functionally all the same problems of the idea, which is we should just have more pronatal policy, which is it just doesn't appear to work. Lots of places try it and it doesn't work. Hungary is not a huge birth success story right now, nor is Russia. So there are places that still have more of this view or have tried to reinsert it and they don't work. Israel is a little bit of a more interesting case from this perspective. But when you are there, people do to some degree what they see around them. And the influence of the Haredi families, of the sort of ultra-Orthodox families, which are huge, is everywhere. I was just in Israel, I guess not now just, but back in June. And I mean, there's obviously a lot happening that you could notice, but you really could feel the difference of being in a high fertility society there, where I'd had this interaction with somebody at the park, Prospect Park, before I had gone to Israel. and he had 4 kids with him.
Women have
and we've
had
just been
access
chatting.
to birth control since the dawn of civilization, legal or illegal. Safe or unsafe. It can't be controlled. Waste of time.
I mean, I think it can be controlled insofar as, like, we can make the safe version of it legal and accessible. You know? If you make the safe version legal, like, you can... It helps women a lot, I think. But thank you for the €5. Very much appreciated.
And I must have said something that made him think a little bit. Like, I was asking, like, what are you doing here with 4 kids? Because he's like, oh, they're all. I'd asked if they're all his because they sort of look different. I thought it might be a group of kids. He's like, oh yeah, but he was sort of explaining it away. He's like, well, we'd only meant to have 3, and then we had twins. In Israel, nobody's explaining away why they have 4 kids. Tons of people have 4 kids. Tons of people.
No one. Like, what? He's telling this story like someone would judge him for, like, someone would judge someone for having 4 kids. Like, oh man, we just have such a shaming culture around having children. That's crazy.
Have 6 kids. Tons of people have 8 kids. So you have a society there that there is an anchor weight of just what is normal being placed by the fact that there is still a huge conservative religious community. But I think just sort of doing the thing I think J.D. Vance was trying to do when he was like scolding childless cat ladies, that doesn't appear to work.
But at the macro level, it can work, right? If enough things change over enough time, keep in mind.
Yeah, if we make things shitty enough for a long enough period of time, people will conform to the parts of society where they aren't treated shittily. You know, what if we just tortured people into being how we think they should be? Like we could like what if we just, like, I don't know, like, herded them into a basement and only let them leave after we had thoroughly tortured and indoctrinated them? What if it was my basement?
If this doesn't happen culturally, it will happen through replacement. So it happens one way or the other.
I mean, that might happen.
So one favors one version of it, no matter what.
It could or it couldn't, right? Or, as I understand there's a view that, well, if you have liberal secular societies begin to shrink, eventually it's just going to be
4
the Amish
kids,
will take over the world.
That's a lot of S**X, you degenerate.
God, off to the sex mines with you.
World. Maybe as the Amish society grows, they will be impinged upon by all the pressures that hit all these other societies, and within a couple generations, their birth rates will fall very rapidly. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all, would you?
It may not be the Amish, but whichever are the remnants of high birth rate cultures, it seems to me they will dominate. Maybe it's Niger, right? In Sahelian Africa. Yeah,
but my understanding of the research on this is that while the numbers are higher in obviously sub-Saharan Africa, the fertility numbers are higher, they're also on a downward trend. It seems to be a downward trend everywhere, which would make sense because you have a universal technological shock to fertility. And the richer people get, the more of that shock there is. So I guess I am
Keep in mind, though, before the pandemic, U.S. was above replacement rate. It doesn't seem so utopian to think we could get back to 2.2, 2.3.
I'm of the view that I have two kind of contrasts.
Imagine spending your time being so concerned with the sex lives of other people and how to convince other people to have sex and maximize fertility. And, like, then imagine you're the kind of guy who thinks about this so often that you're wondering about where to find virgins out in the world because you think that they are the most fertile of all. And then you age into a 63-year-old man who writes a piece for the Free Press under Barry Weiss about how your new favorite actress is an AI simulacrum of a virgin, and you know that they've never had sex before because they're AI, and thus you can enjoy the film more. Like, Jesus, this is bleak.
Casting views here. On the one hand, I am of the view that it seems likely that as societies shrink, they will figure out a cultural answer, paired with
or, kind of like how when societies shrink or populations shrink, they hit a new point of stability. Like, again, the idea that the population was going to grow forever, no. And the idea that the population is going to decline forever, no.
policy answers so people can actually have the lives that they say they want to have, which is lives where they marry and have 2 to 3
Wait, what do you all think of Robert Reich? I like Robert Reich. I think he's good.
kids.
Or sorry, Robert Reich. Also like his son. His son's really funny.
I do think probably, I think the evidence is pretty good that the pressure there has to be on marrying younger, right? I think you've probably seen the charts that have been going around, I think from the FT, but basically if people were marrying younger, the difference here is really about whether or not you get married, right? The sort of piece of leverage is on marriage. People are much more,
Who's his son? Sam Reich. He runs Dropout TV, and they do a lot of really funny shows.
unlikely correctly to have children outside the context of a highly committed, stable relationship. It's very, very hard to have children as a single parent. People do it, obviously, but that's going to be one of the main ingredients of fertility falling, because it's just an incredibly.
Hey, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to raise a kid as a single parent? And maybe those same pressures are still there if there are two parents. And maybe you can just eliminate those pressures, and then it's suddenly a lot easier to take care of those kids. I don't know, just spitballing.
It'll be a difficult thing to do. So there's that. It seems to me that
Pressure to marry younger, excuse me? Look, marrying younger is the only ideas libertarians have, okay? It's why every single one of them knows the age of consent of every state they're in by heart.
you should be able to, particularly if you begin to reorient the kind of cultural and policy machinery of society, to bring up the birth rate by, 0.4, right? That can't be that hard. And then you ask yourself, why doesn't anybody seem able to do it? I mean,
Because of capitalism, stupid. Because of the fucking commodification of our time, our space, our bodies, our labor. Raising a child takes time and it takes your labor. And that means you have less time and less labor to maintain yourself and to do your job that you need to do so that you're not, destitute. That's hard.
I'm pessimistic about both the ability to control
It's the system, stupid.
use policy here, and pessimistic about the ability of culture to act in an organized fashion, right? People have chosen to change the culture, and the culture had a downstream change, is because I think that
These two are not good faith. I actually think they are both saying exactly what they believe right now because they are in familiar company with one another. I think that the mask is off of these two. I think the pretending is done when they are actually discussing this so bluntly.
some of the societies in, Asia and other places that have entered into a very rapid shrinkage and have treated it as a problem, one of them would have figured something out by now. Now, maybe it just hasn't been long enough, and South Korea is going to execute an amazing turnaround of.
Yeah, no, Bema Saberwin, it's why they call it wage slavery. It's, I'm a socialist. I'm well aware.
This, but what I'm observing in South Korea, and frankly, what I feel like I'm observing even a little bit in America, is that gender relations worsen as this happens, right? It's not like it brings everybody together to sort of deal with this problem and think about how we can have the families we want to have and so on. Actually creates enmity, it creates scarcity, and those are very, very poor political conditions for what is both a cultural and policy project based on a kind of cross-gender cohesion and long-term planning. So it seems like it should be possible, but I mean, look, you look at this as much or more than I do. I feel like you're sounding more optimistic than I suspect you really are. Or if you are not, then what is your answer for why no one has done it successfully yet?
I genuinely don't know. I fear it's as with negative emotional contagion, another topic we've discussed offline, that once you get on it, it's hard to reverse, but it's in fact not impossible to reverse. And there are periodic historical reversals in both directions. And at some point we'll see another one, but we need some quite bracing, strong, maybe almost Straussian movement towards some version of cultural conservatism and religion to make this happen.
Is it cultural or is it religion? I think that's
It's
the real
both.
question.
They're packaged. We might have a future that is religious without that much belief in God. That might be fine.
So that might happen. I mean, I think one of the things I just think is true about the world is that religion is a functionally unmatched, depending on which side of this you sit in, either understanding of ultimate reality that enhances human cohesion and cooperation, or just a cultural technology that enhances human cooperation and cohesion? And as religion weakens, belief itself weakens. And you obviously had Ross on, and I thought that was a fantastic conversation. But as belief itself weakens, we have not replaced that with any other technology.
How does he not connect the failures of neoliberalism to our current condition? I mean, because I think he's a true believer in neoliberalism. I think that his main goal is to make neoliberalism cool again, or to like give it an intellectual veneer to make it more acceptable, right? Like, I think a lot of the reason he is where he is because like that's what he does. You know, he was hired to do this job at the New York Times. He gets book deals to do this because of like the economic elite. They like these ideas, you know?
Can we please do away with religion and conservatism in general? They are the source of so many problems.
I don't have the ability to do either of those things.
Cultural or otherwise, that is able to create cooperation, particularly long-term cooperation that requires sacrificing now for gains later or not even in this life, with anything of even nearly matched power. Worse than that, we've probably then added in a bunch of discohesive technologies like social media that make it harder to cooperate, make people more short-term oriented, make people's attention spans even weaker. And so
well, I mean, again, where's the analysis of why that's the case, right? Why does social media do that? And again, the answer lies in capitalism. It's because the way social media companies make money is by serving you ads and collecting your data to sell to other advertisers. And I feel like I'm going crazy here, right? But the financial incentive here for a social media company is to take up your time. Like, getting you to spend more time on Instagram, more time on Facebook, more time on Twitter, more time on Blue Sky. That's how these companies make money. So they're incentivized to build a platform that traps you, that gets you to spend that time, that gets you to shorten your attention span. Because under capitalism, time is money. The more time you spend there, the more money you make them. Yeah, let's not forget YouTube. Yeah, you know. And so, like, it just... there is entirely lacking throughout all of this a cohesive economic understanding of why things are the way they are. And it renders Ezra Klein completely incapable of diagnosing the actual problem. And I don't know if that is by design on Ezra's part, or if it is just one of the biggest fucking blind spots I've ever seen. And functionally, it doesn't matter which one it is, because dude with this blind spot is functionally a conservative.
Underlying text for this, I think, is quite rough. I think religion, I don't really buy cultural conservatism. I think it probably needs to be something like religion, but I don't think you're really able to, I don't think you can do religion instrumentally. I don't think the efforts to do that really work at mass scale.
Let me give you another right-wing view. Tell me what you think. The notion that the most important feature of state capacity is whether a state has enough of its citizens willing to fight and die for it. And in that case, the United States, Israel, but a pretty small number of nations have high state capacity. And most of Western Europe really does not, because they don't have militaries that mean anything. Is that just the number one feature of abundance?
What are you talking about, man? Dude, like, the entire history of Europe is warfare. Like, after World War II, they demobilized their militaries because fucking World War II happened, man. Holy shit.
In state capacity?
I think two things about that. So one, I think if you listen to the right in America right now, they would say we don't even have that anymore. And it's a reason that J.D. Vance and others sort of make this constant point that nationalism is not an idea. It is about having a physical connection to the land and the culture, usually multi-generational, that makes it enough your home that you would fight and die for it. Right? I mean, that was a...
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you referencing JD Vance's backstory? Are you fucking serious right now?
Others sort of make this. They would say we don't even have that anymore. And it's a reason that JD Vance and others sort of make this constant point that nationalism is not an idea. It is about having a physical connection to the land and the culture, usually multi-generational, that makes it enough.
Yeah, and they're wrong. They're wrong about that. They're fucking wrong about that. Also, just throw this out there, JD Vance lied about his past. JD Vance hates where he came from. He despises it. If you read like his book, Hillbilly Elegy, like it is abundantly clear that he despises where he came from. And that makes sense considering he went on to become a hedge fund guy working for Peter Thiel. Like, we're not talking about, like, he's not a nationalist because, like, he has some built-in connection to the land, a mystical idea, you know, he's able to talk to the trees and the rivers and the valleys. Like, no, he's a nationalist because it serves his best interests. It serves him personally, and that's why he has that idea, because he only serves himself. It is why when he is in a government role as a nationalist, he doesn't actually fight for all Americans. He fights for him. And that is it. It is a hollow ideology he employs to build power. Why was it made into a film? Because liberals loved that shit. Liberals love, like, poverty, misery porn, and that's exactly what J.D. Vance gave them.
Your home that you would fight and die for it, right? I mean, that was a major theme of Vance's RNC speech. The reason I'm not sure I think this is true is that I think...
No, his backstory is he grew up poor and his mom was addicted to drugs and he had a shitty childhood and then like got out and then like proceeded to like, I don't know, be shitty to his mom. You know, like it's just we're not going into JD Vance's backstory here, but like it's the story of a kid who grew up poor, got into Harvard, like not Harvard, I don't think, but got into like elite schools and then fell in with the hedge fund crowd and like then wrote a book about how he grew up poor. And everyone was like, "Oh, what a triumph!" And then he became a conservative, you know, or was always a conservative, and you know, ran for office, won it, was extra shitty and extra scummy and extra nobody liked him. And wow, then Donald Trump came along and he rode some coattails up to the vice presidency.
That the question of whether or not people will fight and die for their country operates very differently under actual threat than under abstract discussion. So how much would you have said Ukrainians were excited to fight and die for their country, you know, 6 years ago, 8 years ago?
I mean, I don't think Ukrainians are excited to fight and die for their country right now. Like, I don't think anyone's excited about the dying part.
15 years ago. And it turns out they are extraordinarily, heroically, courageously willing to fight and die for the country under the actual conditions of threat and invasion. And so then I think you get into kind of an interesting question about, well, what kind of state capacity in this sort of fight and die measure are you really looking for? Are you asking the question of how willing are Americans to fight and die for their country if their country tells them that the defense of Taiwan is in the national interest? I'm not sure how willing Americans are going to be to do that. How willing would they be to fight and die for their country if China was sending, you know, armed divisions landing on, you know, the shores of America? Probably much more so. So I think some of what we're talking there about state capacity reflects actually the success of peaceful institutions over a long period of time and the way in which it will turn around is under conditions that we should not want to see coming.
But they're probably coming. I mean, doesn't America have...
But China's probably going to invade us, right? Like, let's spend some time talking about this. Like, I've played Risk a few times, man, and I think it's possible that China could invade us. Like, just like, what if they did, though?
Have a remarkable record, say with Latino soldiers, maybe not born in this country, but who exhibit extreme bravery in recent times, fighting for causes in Iraq, Afghanistan, that are quite obscure in some way, right? Now,
I mean, were we fighting for America in Afghanistan and Iraq? Because I don't think so. I think most veterans disagree with that that assessment of what happened, man.
They were told it's important, but American soldiers are amongst the best in the world.
They were told it's important. It was important, and it all turned out to be a lie. And when your country lies to you to get you to like kill and be killed, there's kind of a big problem when you then are like, well, why aren't people signing up for the armed forces? Well, like maybe it's the lies. Maybe it's the fact that a lot of people fought and died and killed like countless civilians in order to like set up Halliburton and like gas companies for like positive quarterly profits. Like that's not what they signed up for.
And America does that. Israel, I know there's an issue with Haredi, but Israel clearly does that. You go to Germany, and you tell people, well, this is how it's going to be. I think there's just no enthusiasm. People haven't grown up, with guns or martial spirit. There's a culture of vacation. It just seems like an obvious huge gap to me.
I mean, I think that is some wildly, American, like, not hubris. Like, I've been struggling to put it into words. Like, that is a remarkable way to like denigrate an entire continent of people. Like to say that they are a continent of like a vacation continent. Like, no, it's not even Western chauvinism. Like, it's another level. And it's just like, they have guns, they have bombs, they build tanks and aircraft, and also have nuclear weapons, man. Like, what are you talking about? They're not building up military to invade each other. They are collectively aligned in a defensive pact with one another and the United States. And that defensive pact, with their combined might, even without the US, like, they are a formidable force. And to sell it short, like, it's actually a fantastic feat of cooperation that allows them to not each have these massive militaries and be on edge because Poland's gonna invade, we gotta be on edge. Like, no, you don't have to do that when you're all in a defensive pact.
Where America is clearly in the lead. Ukraine, great. Israel, but not many places. And that's how we should think about state capacity.
Don't you think in Germany, though, that reflects a absorbed view of maybe that martial... it is not as if there is something in the German people that is unwilling to...
Oh, sure. That's why they don't have state capacity. But if you went to the Dutch, I don't think you would see so much more enthusiasm. Or try Luxembourg. I think Switzerland would be an outlier.
I think the place where we probably disagree on this is that I think under...
What a fucking weirdo, man. Like, there's nothing inherent to any of these societies that say they couldn't militarize. Like, there's nothing... Like, when you look at their state capacity, like, Ukraine didn't have the state capacity prior to being invaded, and they built it up, because that's what happens when a war happens, man.
Of threat that would change very rapidly, and I guess you could say, right, this is definitely a view
Vance is in the thrall of
which is
Peter
that
Thiel.
Our societies have become soft under conditions of too little threat. And you're, of course, right about the extraordinary success the American military has integrating.
Well, our societies have become soft. Oh man, what a terrible world we live in, where we're not constantly under the threat of martial violence.
Immigrants integrating first-generation Americans. It's, again, a reason why I think that part of J.D. Vance's speech was, let's call it unkind as a very low level, because like plenty of people fight and die for this country who do not have 7 generations buried in the same Kentucky graveyard. But I, at the same time, think that there is kind of something missing about it. So something that's jogged for me is, you've read the book, Where's My Flying Car? Where, what is the name of the author? I'm just blanking on it.
Stores?
Yeah, J.R. Stores. So he's got an entire section in that book where he is arguing that one reason we have simply ceased inventing and ceased having the sort of heroic entrepreneurial energy to invent is that we are not sufficiently exposed, countries are not sufficiently exposed to invasion anymore. And he basically says, look, like there was for much of human history before we had.
Oh man, what a terrible premise of to devote an entire book to. We need to bring back threat of invasion in order to spur technological innovation is just like one of the stupidest fucking things I've ever heard in my life.
At all these, annoying all this annoying liberal internationalism. If you were an underperforming society, you could simply be swallowed up by the overperforming society next door. And now we don't let that happen. And that allows a kind of soft.
Yeah, we don't let the military take over of adjacent societies anymore. We have gone so far off the rails. Like this is like, I have no point of comparison to this. This entire conversation should invalidate like both their careers. Like this should be a career-ending exchange between both of them.
And stagnation to take root and infect societies. And I just think if that were true, among other things, America would not be as dynamic a society as it is because we are much less exposed to invasion. Whereas a lot of societies that exist under that kind of martial threat, and for that reason have ended up with very martial cultures, at least for long periods of time, don't seem to have that dynamism, right?
Under this logic, like, I don't know, the Palestinian people should be like inventing like warp technology, like having lived under threat of constant invasion for like the last, 80 years. Like, what? Okay, like just threaten to invade, and suddenly we'll get the next cancer cure and like a warp bubble tech. Like, what are you talking about? This is nonsense shit.
Riverboat deck is Cowen town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube is where she streams. All that content is bursting the seams. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Her sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord.